Friends, last week I've cut this beautiful Mark IV from Tamiya in half. For diorama purposes, of course. Well, I've got the entire diorama built and ready for some painting, and that's what we're gonna focus on tonight. All using an airbrush. Every loose part that I'm keeping for easier painting needs to be attached to something. Super glue and toothpicks work perfectly for this. Now I can paint everything without laying my filthy hands on the stuff. The same goes for the figure. I pinned it with a wire and it's also ready to go. I was also able to hold the tank in my Octopus M2M painting stand. So let's start with priming. But wait, I'm all out of black primer. And my mahogany one, this won't last for the entire scene. Whew. Oh well, here we go again. I love me a good durable primer, and while everyone has their own preferences, Surfacer from Mr. Hobby has never let me down. It's just that I really like to start with a very dark base, either completely black or very dark brown, depending on the subject. So my last minute solution was to prime everything gray, and then meticulously and time-wastingly spray over it with whatever leftover black paint I could find. I love Tamiya XF1 way too much, so this MRP basic black came in super handy. But then I remembered something even better. Black acrylic primer from Mission Models. So at the end of the day, everything turned out well and I had my dark base coat on everything. It'll play a crucial role in this process, and there's no better place to start with the fun stuff than the tank itself. Almost exactly like on my AMX50, I began by applying the base color in a cloudy, mottled pattern. But this time I kept it softer and looser. As for the color itself, British tanks were painted in a brown color. The best recipe would be Tamiya Flat Earth mixed with Deck Tan. But here's my problem. That's the color combination I'm going to use for the diorama, so I desperately wanted the tank to look a little different. I've used khaki as a base color on both of my previous World War I subjects, and I was more than happy with the result. But over this black primer, it was giving a slight greenish hue, so to avoid that, I added a few drops of dark yellow. Next was a layer of highlights, and here I simply added a reasonable amount of Deck Tan. Normally I'd outline every detail and panel with a dark color, a so-called airbrushed pin wash, but a Mark IV has so many surface details it's gonna shade itself, so to say. As with all my models, I'm going for a very pale finish because it's just much easier to weather, and every effect you apply over such a surface is gonna be nicely visible. I applied this layer in a textured gradient, meaning I added more on the upper half and sprayed it not in a smooth, uniform coat, but rather in this squiggly motion. Here's how I'm mixing my highlight colors. Everything's done by feel, hence no exact mixing ratios. My goal is always to make the next layer significantly lighter than the previous one. It's easy to control the intensity when you're working with heavily diluted paint. This third and final highlight was applied very sparingly. Only on the most exposed surfaces such as the roof plates, various access doors, pistol ports and maintenance access covers, and also as a very fine highlight at the top of each vertical panel. Such a light paint job is gonna provide plenty of room for oil paints, localized filters and streaking effects, so the final color of the tank might vary once it's finished. The next part is always difficult on these World War I British subjects. Masking over such a complicated surface is just no fun, but it's the best approach if you want an authentic looking result. I'm no masking professional, and sadly, poor results can't be excused by field apply markings here, because the British Army actually hired artists to apply these identification stripes and decorated tactical numbers. But hey, I tried to stay true to my approach and I applied both colors in an uneven mottled pattern. And I think despite some imperfections, they turned out pretty neat. Now it's time for some smaller markings. Because I'm building a random, basically a fictional tank, I went with some leftover decals from my Whippet. They're Tacom decals, and as usual with them, they're on the thicker side. But it's nothing that couldn't be hidden by a coat of flat varnish and some weathering effects. Okay, so I wanted to quickly add some emphasis on the shrapnel damage and cracked armor, so I carefully outlined these areas with the grime colored ammo shader. Of course, I'll add more texture to these later with chipping and rust tones, but this effect is gonna play along nicely with them. Now, take a look at this side, and compare it to the other. Yeah, I decided to do exactly what you don't want to do if you want to paint your Mark IV in a short amount of time. But the temptation to add the airbrushed pin wash was just too strong, and unlike my previous models, I didn't go overboard. Instead of spraying it over every single detail, around every panel and crevice, I focused it on the rivets and bolts only. Also, once you get used to ammo shaders, working with them is actually very pleasant. I find them easier to control than my homemade mixture of heavily diluted black and brown, and the biggest advantage, if you make a mistake, they can be wiped away with tap water. How awesome is that? This means they're excellent for finishing touches on your paint job because any mistake is reversible and you won't have to go back and fix it with, one of the highlight colors or something. I also used it to add a subtle dirt gradient towards the bottom. This should theoretically help blend the tank with the muddy water and also give some impression of dirt accumulated by the receding waterline. So now it was just about hosing the entire model with a coat of flat varnish. No, I'm not spraying it with my usual satin clear, because I feel like any sort of sheen, even if it's very subtle, can sometimes ruin the impression of your model when it's placed in a diorama under a specific angle. With a flat coat, every surface of the model is gonna appear exactly how it should, regardless of its placement or the light source hitting it. So there we have it, ready for weathering and everything. Another goal for this diorama is a low saturation, gloomy look to give the scene that 1917 atmosphere. We'll see if I succeed in that, but so far I think we're on a good path. Oh, and let's not forget the tracks. Here I went with the traditional Mike Rinaldi approach and base coated them with German grey. And then a very quick sketch, so to say, of the rust tones using flat brown. This will get plastered with more rust effects and mud tones, so most of it won't be visible anyway. But yeah, okay, the tank itself is fully base coated now, and we can turn our attention to the other stuff, namely all those loose details and whatnot. Well, with these 3D printed flimsies, I could use the full potential of the black primer. Most of them were painted red, and because I used very diluted paint, I could slowly build up the opacity and keep the shading visible without the color becoming too vivid. From what I've seen in some military collections, they would come in different colors as well. Using some random faded green is less tricky than working with red, so here I could also apply one extra layer of highlights, making each flimsy look slightly different. The figure was only pre-shaded with flat white. That'll have to do for now, because I'm using an airbrush only in this video. The remaining colors will be blocked in using a paintbrush and colored glazes in another episode. It's strange, but this is the thing I'm looking the most forward to. Oh, and because I'll have two discarded helmets in the diorama, I painted those along with the one on the figure with an airbrush, so, they'll have the same look. Again, some post-shading can be employed here, and while I didn't focus on color accuracy too much so far, here I found a pretty good match. So yeah, that's the figure being taken care of, and also everything else that I'll be weathering separately. The last thing that needs to be airbrushed is the diorama itself. This is what I've been most curious about, because it's the first time I'm able to compose, paint, and weather the diorama along with the tank. In all my previous projects, I completed the tank, then the figures, and then I focused on the diorama. What difference is it gonna make, you might ask? Well, I don't know, honestly, but my theory is that it'll allow me to color compose and harmonize the entire scene, so nothing will stand out or look out of place. As I said, my aim is to achieve a poorly saturated, gloomy, sort of vintage feeling atmosphere, because everything in this scene is devoid of life. As such, my goal is to keep everything rather dull and make the soldier stand out by using more vivid tones on him to sort of draw attention to him as the only living part of the scene. That's some arty-farty bullcrap, my friends, and I can't wait to see how much I'll succeed or fail with this idea. It's also the first time I'm trying to actually post-shade the groundwork with an airbrush. Until now I was always satisfied with a single boring layer of light color and everything else was done with enamel earth washes. So we'll see how that's gonna turn out. Lastly, the fake bottom of the shell craters might end up being completely invisible once I pour the colored resin water. But adding some tones here and there is something I've read in a few books, so I don't know, maybe it'll do some good. Finally, I airbrushed all the wooden details in a bright deck tan. The rest will be carried out with acrylics and oil paint washes, and this will provide me with a good textured base coat. And that's gonna be it for this video. It probably doesn't look like much, but if you apply base colors and nothing else with an airbrush to a whole scene, this is how it might look like. It's a start. So yeah, that's pretty interesting, right? I mean, of course, we could make a challenge, like painting an entire diorama only with an airbrush, and that would include airbrushing the entire figure, airbrushing the mud and rust tones on the tank, and so on. Well, I don't know how I'd be able to airbrush epoxy resin water, so the challenge wouldn't work in the end, I guess, but you get the point. This is an airbrushed diorama that's now ready for paintbrush treatment, such as spin washes, all kinds of fancy oil paint techniques, chipping, rust tones, mud effects, rendering the groundwork, painting the figure, and so on. I don't know how much I'll manage to do in the next episode, but I'll try to focus on something specific, like a collection of techniques on the entire scene. So until then, thank you for watching, my friends. I hope you found this video helpful or at least interesting to watch, and a special thanks goes to my wonderful patrons who make this weekly show possible. Yeah, it's that time again, so if you'd like to have something like a Night Shift exclusive blog or a magazine subscription, my Patreon page is the best place to go. I post there almost every day with updates from my models. I often go deep into techniques and thoughts about stuff, actually much more than a video could take, and we can, for example, get in touch through DMs, comments and emails. I'm also posting 1 week early ad-free videos there, so the next episode is already live on Patreon. I also have these beautiful studio photos in full resolution, so you can download them for your own reference or something. And last but not least, various interesting things, such as references and inspirational pictures for dioramas, old buildings and landscapes, or 3D models for your printing pleasure. Okay, so now I'll sign off, and I'll probably start by applying a round of pin washes on the tank, and probably the groundwork as well. And you, my friends, stay safe, stay awesome, keep building those models, don't just collect them, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers!